not by a long shot. Fellow serial murdering, contemptible, and ensuing media darling Ted Bundy, as well as deadly drifter Henry Lee Lucas, someone you'd think was straight out of central casting for 1970s hillbilly horror movies, both confessed to, or at least hinted at, other victims all over the map. In the case of Lucas, his confessions included literally thousands of victims of various sex murders he claimed to have committed as part of a psychopathic attention-seeking ruse that has, in large part, fueled the urban legend that serial killers want to be caught and are primarily driven by publicity. Not true. False confessions by Lucas-type killers, while rare, are driven for the most part by the same pathology that leads them, when not in jail, to bombard their coworkers, friends, neighbors, and lovers with overstated achievements, fake credentials, and manufactured successes for much of their lives. These are the hallmarks of a psychopath, and psychopaths are, at least anecdotally, thought to be responsible for most serial murders and, by extension, are behind most crimes that become cold cases. More on that later, too. Psychopaths like Bundy and Lucas and many others have confessed to crimes they didn't commit in order to serve their own egos and rational self-interest, to make themselves invaluable to law enforcement, or to delay their executions for the killings for which they'd actually been arrested and convicted. Such manipulators string cops along with specious stories, just detailed enough to be believable, but also just vague enough to merit further interviews, so they can spend their days in the comparatively comfy confines of an interview room, enjoying taxpayer-funded McDonald's meals and Marlboros rather than in a prison cell. In Bundy's case, his subterfuge and delay tactics became increasingly obvious, and he rode the lightning as scheduled in the Florida electric chair on Friday, January 24, 1989, a day coined Fry Day by the celebratory tailgaters gathered outside the prison walls. Lucas, on the other hand, eventually had his death sentence commuted to life in prison. He later died of a heart attack long after his thousands of confessions, taken at face value by cops eager to clear cold case murders nationwide, turned out to be completely false. Nonetheless, Lucas was no small-timer. He might not have killed the thousands he claimed, but he was likely good for at least a dozen murders, most of them sex slayings. His first victim was his own mother. Samuel Little turned out to be different. Since the heyday of phony confessions in the 1980s, the process for vetting prisoner confessions and identifying false ones has improved, and digital record management systems have emerged among law enforcement agencies. So in 2018, Little's stories, even with spotty details, were more easily corroborated by investigators. Given the history of convicted serial killers trying to inflate their body counts, some skeptics naturally first thought Little might also be toying with police. But before long, his stories of sex crimes spanning the entire nation over 3 decades took on the unmistakable ring of truth. Soon, Little had accounted for more than 90 victims across at least 14 states between 1970 and 2005, victims consigned to the dustbins of history in a nation consistently clocking upwards of 16,000 criminal homicides a year. Every year. We can now accurately estimate that serial killers like Little are likely responsible for about 1 in 20 of these cases, not 1 in 100, as stated in earlier FBI publicity materials. 1 in 20 may not sound like a lot, but the damage is cumulative, both to the communities these killers ravage and to the criminal justice system as a whole. It also means serial killers are responsible for far more murders, including unsolved murders, than previously estimated. The net result is that they create an overall drag on the annual solved murder rate, while at the same time generating a disproportionate number of cold cases. They distract, misdirect, and introduce chaos into an already chaotic and disorganized criminal justice system. Many jurisdictions are still rooted in moving around paper and fail to report annual murders to the federal government, meaning annual murder statistics are more estimates than concrete, verifiable numbers. And it's getting worse. By virtue of their abnormality, unpredictability, and disruptive nature, serial killers also leave an unmistakable mark within the larger haystack of annual murders that distinguishes their crimes from thousands of other killings, most of which, fortunately, do get solved. In other words, serial killers are inextricably entwined with unsolved murders.